Commander Zethkar stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the small blue planet slowly rotate below. His forearms were crossed behind his back in the traditional pose of Valdoran authority. The planet looked peaceful from space, with white clouds swirling over green and brown continents. It reminded him of 12 other worlds he had conquered in the past 50 years. "Sir, our scouts report the dominant species has very basic technology," reported his second-in-command, Captain Veltar. "They still use chemical propulsion for space travel and metal projectiles for weapons. Their largest military vessels are smaller than our fighters." Zethkar's scaled face showed no emotion, but inside he felt the familiar satisfaction of an easy victory. In his 300 years of military service, he had never met a species that could match Valdoran technology. The humans would be no different. "How many of them are there?" he asked. "Approximately 8 billion across the planet, sir. They are divided into many small nations that seem to fight among themselves frequently." Even better, Zethkar thought. A divided enemy was a weak enemy. The Valdoran Empire had learned long ago that unity was strength. These humans, scattered and fighting each other, would fall within days. "Begin the first phase," he ordered. "Target their major population centers and military installations. Standard conquest protocol." The first attacks came at dawn across Earth's major cities. Valdoran plasma cannons tore through human defenses like paper. In New York, the military base was destroyed before the soldiers could even reach their weapons. In London, the government buildings disappeared in bright flashes of energy. In Tokyo, the harbor filled with smoking wreckage of human naval vessels. Jake Morrison was drinking coffee in his small apartment when the explosion started. He was a former Marine who now worked at a construction company, but the sound of warfare was something he would never forget. He looked out his window and saw strange ships in the sky, sleek and silver, firing beams of light that cut through buildings like knives. His phone rang. It was his old commanding officer. "Jake, we need every veteran we can find. The National Guard is setting up a command post at the old warehouse district. Can you make it?" Jake grabbed his rifle from the closet. He had kept it clean and ready, out of habit, never thinking he would need it again. "On my way, sir." Across the city, Lisa Chen was in her engineering lab when the university's emergency alert system activated. She was working late on a project involving advanced materials when the building shook from a nearby explosion. Through the window, she could see fires burning across the skyline. Lisa had always been curious about how things worked. As a child, she took apart every electronic device she could find. Now, as she watched the alien ships patrol overhead, she felt that same curiosity mixed with determination. If these invaders had better technology, she was going to figure out how it worked. The human military response was exactly what Zethkar expected. Their jets were shot down before they could get close to his ships. Their missiles exploded harmlessly against Valdoran shields. Their ground forces scattered when faced with plasma weapons that could melt through their vehicles. Within the first week, every major human military installation was destroyed or abandoned. The human government sent desperate messages offering to surrender, but Zethkar ignored them. He preferred to let fear build before accepting submission. It made the occupation much easier. But something was wrong. Instead of the usual chaos and panic that followed a successful invasion, the humans began to organize. Small groups of fighters appeared everywhere, using weapons and tactics that confused his ground troops. They did not fight like any species Zethkar had conquered before. "Sir, we are receiving reports of continued resistance," Captain Veltar reported during the morning briefing. "Human fighters are attacking our supply convoys using primitive explosive devices." "How many fighters?" Zethkar asked. "That is the problem, sir. We cannot get an accurate count. They appear to be ordinary civilians during the day, but at night they become combatants. Our troops cannot tell who is a threat." This was unusual. Other species had clear divisions between soldiers and civilians. The soldiers fought until defeated, then the civilians accepted new rulers. These humans seemed to think every adult was a potential warrior. Jake Morrison had gathered 30 other veterans in an abandoned factory. They had very few weapons and almost no military equipment, but they had something more valuable: knowledge of how to fight when outnumbered and outgunned. "Listen up," Jake told his small group. "These aliens have better weapons and better ships, but they fight like they expect us to line up and march at them like we're in some old movie. We're going to show them how Americans really fight." Pointed to a map of the city. "Hit and run. Use the sewers and subway tunnels. Make them afraid to patrol alone. Every time they think they control an area, we remind them they don't." The first guerrilla attack came 3 days later. A Valdoran patrol was moving through downtown when explosive devices planted in trash cans detonated simultaneously. 2 alien soldiers were killed and 3 were wounded. Before backup could arrive, the attackers had disappeared into the maze of city streets. Sethkar read the report with growing irritation. This kind of resistance should have ended within days of the initial conquest. These humans were supposed to surrender once they realized they could not win in direct combat. "Increase patrols," he ordered. "Use the fear doctrine. For every attack on our forces, destroy 1 human settlement." But the fear doctrine did not work as expected. Instead of making the humans more willing to surrender, it seemed to make them angrier. The attacks increased in frequency and creativity. Lisa Chen had been busy. Working with a small team of engineers and scientists, she had been studying pieces of destroyed Valdoran equipment. The technology was advanced, but it followed logical principles. More importantly, it had weaknesses. "Look at this," she showed her team a damaged alien weapon. "The power source is incredibly efficient, but it needs a specific frequency to maintain stability. If we can build a device that disrupts that frequency..." Within a month, human fighters were using crude but effective weapons that could disable Valdoran equipment. The technology was primitive compared to what the aliens used, but it worked. Sethkar stared at the latest casualty reports. He had lost more soldiers in 1 month of fighting humans than in his previous 5 conquests combined. This was not how invasions were supposed to go. For the first time in his long military career, Commander Sethkar began to wonder if he had underestimated his enemy. The war had been going on for 18 months when Captain Amy Rodriguez received her most dangerous mission. She stood in the underground bunker that served as the Human Space Command Center, looking at a holographic display of enemy ship positions. "The alien supply convoy will pass through Sector 7 in 6 hours, General Martinez explained. "It's heavily defended, but our intelligence suggests they're carrying critical equipment for their ground operations." Amy studied the tactical display. 12 human fighters against 30 alien escort ships was not good odds by any measure. Her pilots were brave, but they were flying modified civilian craft against military vessels designed for war. "Sir, even if we succeed, we'll lose most of our squadron," she said quietly. "I know, Captain, but if we don't stop those supplies, they'll have enough equipment to launch a full offensive against our remaining cities. Sometimes the mission matters more than the people flying it." Amy nodded. She understood the mathematics of war. Sometimes you had to risk everything to save something bigger. 6 hours later, her squadron launched from a hidden base built inside an abandoned asteroid mine. The human fighters were small and fast, cobbled together from spare parts and determination. Each pilot knew they probably would not return home. "Remember the plan," Amy spoke into her radio. "Hit the supply ships first, ignore the escorts until the mission is complete. If you get in trouble, don't try to be a hero. Complete the mission." But as they approached the alien convoy, Amy saw her pilots doing something that would have gotten them court-martialed in peacetime. Instead of following orders to ignore each other if shot down, they were covering for damaged aircraft and helping wounded pilots escape. Lieutenant Bobby Martinez risked his own ship to rescue pilot Sarah Williams when her engines failed. Sergeant Danny Cooper deliberately drew enemy fire away from 2 other fighters, knowing it would probably get him killed. The tactical discipline was falling apart, but somehow the mission was succeeding anyway. Amy watched in amazement as her pilots destroyed 8 of the 10 supply ships while suffering only 3 losses. By all military logic, they should have been wiped out completely. Instead, they were flying home with the enemy convoy in ruins behind them. On the ground, the resistance war was changing too. Jake Morrison now commanded over 2,000 fighters, spread across 3 states. They operated in small cells, using tactics that made no sense to the alien occupiers. The Valdorans had expected human resistance to follow predictable patterns. Soldiers would fight soldiers, civilians would hide, and eventually everyone would accept defeat when the cost became too high. Instead, the humans seemed to get stronger the longer the war continued. Jake was meeting with cell leaders in an abandoned subway station when he received word that the aliens had captured one of his best operatives. Sam Parker had been caught while planting explosives at an alien communication center. "We have to assume they'll torture him for information," said Maria Santos, one of his lieutenants. "Standard procedure is to evacuate any positions he knew about." Jake shook his head. "Sam's been with us since the beginning. He knows the locations of 12 safe houses and the identities of 50 fighters. If we abandon everyone he might betray, we lose half our network. So what do? We get him back." The rescue mission was insane by any reasonable military standard. Jake led 30 fighters in a direct assault on a heavily fortified alien detention center to save one man. They lost 8 people getting Sam out, and the tactical advantage was questionable at best. But something happened that Jake had not expected. Word of the rescue spread through the human resistance network. Morale improved dramatically. Recruitment increased. Other cell leaders began taking bigger risks, knowing their people would not abandon them. Dr. Kevin Walsh was working in a hidden laboratory beneath a destroyed hospital when he made his breakthrough. For months he had been studying captured alien biological samples, looking for weaknesses in their physiology. "Their immune systems are incredibly efficient," he explained to his research team. "But that efficiency makes them vulnerable to specific genetic viruses. I think I can create something that will make them sick without killing them." "Why not kill them?" asked Dr. Jennifer Brooks. "Because dead enemies can become martyrs. Sick enemies lose morale and become a burden on their military, medical system. Plus, it shows we can reach them anywhere, anytime." Within weeks, Valdoran soldiers across the planet were falling ill with a mysterious virus that caused severe fatigue and disorientation. The sickness was not fatal, but it made fighting almost impossible. Medical facilities became overcrowded, and healthy soldiers had to care for sick ones. More importantly, the psychological effect was devastating. The Valdorans had thought themselves superior to human biology. Now they were being defeated by invisible weapons they could not fight. Commander Zethkar read the latest reports with growing confusion and frustration. Human resistance was not decreasing as expected. Instead, it was becoming more sophisticated and more effective. His military advisors could not explain what was happening. "Sir, perhaps we should consider the total destruction option," suggested Captain Veltar. "If we eliminate the major population centers completely, resistance will become impossible." Zethkar considered this. It was standard Valdoran policy when facing stubborn resistance. Simply destroy the enemy's ability to support a military force. "Prepare orbital bombardment of their 10 largest cities," he ordered. But before the bombardment could begin, human intelligence intercepted the communication. Within hours, civilian populations began evacuating the targeted cities in organized, disciplined movements that amazed alien observers. Instead of panic and chaos, the humans moved like they had been practicing for this moment. Families helped each other, strangers shared resources, and essential personnel stayed behind to maintain critical services until the last possible moment. Lisa Chen had been promoted to chief engineer for the Resistance Technology Division. Working with salvaged alien equipment and human creativity, her team was producing weapons that should have been impossible with Earth's industrial base. "The key is not trying to match their technology," she explained to a group of factory workers. "We combine their advanced components with our mass production techniques. It's not elegant, but it works." The factories were hidden in abandoned mines, old subway tunnels, and burned-out buildings. Workers included everyone from retired engineers to high school students. They worked in shifts around the clock, producing hybrid weapons that grew more effective with each iteration. When Zethkar finally ordered the bombardment of human cities, he expected to find empty ruins that would demoralize the resistance. Instead, he found that the humans had turned the evacuation into a tactical advantage. The cities were abandoned, but the populations had regrouped in smaller communities that were harder to target and easier to defend. Standing on his bridge, watching the empty cities burn below, Zethkar realized something disturbing. After 18 months of war, the humans were not weaker than when he had arrived. They were stronger, more organized, and more dangerous. For the first time in his 3-century military career, Commander Zethkar began to suspect he might not win this war. Commander Zethkar could not sleep. For the first time in 200 years, he lay awake in his quarters thinking about an enemy. The humans had been fighting his forces for over 2 years now, and nothing was going according to plan. He walked to his personal computer and began reviewing recorded communications between human military units. As a military commander, he had always studied his enemies, but this was different. He was trying to understand something that made no sense to his training. The first recording was from a human pilot named Captain Rodriguez during a space battle 3 months earlier. Her fighter had been damaged and she was likely to die, but instead of requesting immediate rescue, she had said to her squadron, "Complete the mission first. Take care of my people. I'll hold them off as long as I can." No Valdoran pilot would ever say such a thing. Personal survival was the primary duty of every soldier. Yet this human had voluntarily sacrificed herself so others could escape, and somehow this made her squadron fight better, not worse. The second recording confused him even more. It was from the human resistance leader Jake Morrison, speaking to his fighters after a failed mission that had cost them 12 people. "We lost good people today," Morrison had said. Each one of them knew the risks. They chose to fight anyway because they believed in something bigger than themselves. We honor them by continuing their work. Zethkar paused the recording. In Valdoran military culture, failed missions were analyzed for tactical errors and the responsible commanders were punished. But this human was using failure to motivate his troops to fight harder. It made no logical sense, yet it seemed to work. On his main screen, Zethkar opened a file about a human teacher named Ben Roberts. Roberts had been captured during a raid on a human school that was being used as a supply depot. During interrogation, instead of revealing military information, Roberts had talked about his students. "You want to know about humans?" Roberts had said to his Valdoran captors. "We teach our children that knowledge is more important than comfort, that questions are more valuable than answers, and that every person has the right to think for themselves. That's why you'll never beat us. You can destroy our cities and kill our soldiers, but you can't kill an idea." 3 days later, Roberts had been rescued in a mission that cost the humans 15 fighters to save 1 teacher. When Zethkar reviewed the tactical analysis, he could not understand why they had considered the exchange worthwhile. The more recordings he studied, the more confused he became. The humans fought with an emotional intensity that should have made them weak and unpredictable. Instead, it seemed to give them strength and focus that his own troops could not match. He found a communication from General Nancy Scott to her troops before what the humans called the Battle of Chicago. Her forces were outnumbered 5-1 and had limited ammunition, but her message was not about tactical advantages or strategic importance. "We are fighting for our families, our freedom, and our future," she had said. "Every person behind our lines is counting on us to keep them safe. We may not have the best weapons or the biggest army, but we have something our enemies don't understand. We have love for what we're protecting, and that makes us stronger than any technology." Zethkar had commanded armies for 3 centuries. He understood logistics, tactics, and strategy. But this concept of fighting for love was completely foreign to him. Valdoran soldiers fought for duty, honor, and the glory of the empire. Personal emotions were considered weaknesses that interfered with military efficiency. Yet somehow, these emotional humans were winning battles they should have lost. The most disturbing recording was from a recent rescue mission. Lieutenant Commander Pete Johnson had led a dangerous operation to save a single wounded pilot who had been shot down behind enemy lines. Johnson's team had fought through heavy resistance to reach the pilot, then carried him to safety while under constant attack. "Why did you risk so many soldiers for 1 pilot?" a captured Valdoran officer had asked Johnson during a prisoner exchange. "Because he's one of us," Johnson had answered simply. We don't leave our people behind. Zethkar reviewed the tactical analysis of that rescue mission. Johnson had risked 43 soldiers to save one man. By any reasonable military calculation, it was a terrible decision. One pilot was not worth 43 soldiers. But the rescued pilot, Lieutenant Danny Hayes, had later provided intelligence that led to the destruction of 3 Valdoran supply bases. The information he gathered during his time behind enemy lines had been incredibly valuable. More importantly, the rescue had improved morale throughout the human forces. Other pilots began taking greater risks, knowing their comrades would not abandon them. The cycle of illogical human behavior was becoming clear to Zethkar. They valued individual lives in ways that seemed tactically foolish, but this somehow made them more effective as a military force. They fought harder because they trusted each other completely. Zethkar opened another file, this one containing surveillance footage from a human refugee camp. He expected to see the usual scenes of despair and defeat that followed successful invasions. Instead, he saw something he had never witnessed before. The refugees were organizing themselves into a functioning community. Adults were teaching children in makeshift schools. Medical personnel were treating wounded civilians with limited supplies. Engineers were building improved shelters from salvaged materials. Most surprising of all, they were preparing for future resistance operations. The camp was not just a place for defeated people to hide. It was a training ground for the next generation of fighters. In one recording, a human child asked her teacher why they had to keep studying when their world was being invaded. The teacher, a woman named Carol Martinez, had replied, "Because learning never stops being important. The aliens can destroy our buildings and take our cities, but they can't take away what we know. Knowledge is the one weapon they can't capture." Zethkar realized he was witnessing something unprecedented in his military experience. These humans were not just fighting a war. They were preparing for a conflict that might last generations. They were teaching their children to resist, to think, and to never accept defeat. For the first time since the invasion began, Zethkar began to understand that he was not fighting an ordinary enemy. The humans were not just defending territory or resources. They were defending a way of thinking, a set of beliefs about individual worth and collective responsibility that made them fundamentally different from any species he had ever encountered. Sitting in his quarters in the early hours of the morning, Commander Zethkar made a decision that would have shocked his subordinates. He was going to study these humans more carefully, not to defeat them more efficiently, but to understand what made them so different from every other species in the galaxy. What he learned would change everything he believed about war, victory, and the nature of true strength. The war had lasted 3 years when Dr. Rachel Green walked into the neutral zone carrying a white flag. She was a former diplomat who had spent the last 2 years coordinating human refugee operations. Now she had come to speak with Commander Zethkar about ending the bloodshed. Zethkar met her in the ruins of what had once been a human city. Buildings stood like broken teeth against the sky, and the smell of smoke still lingered in the air. But instead of the fear or hatred he expected to see in her eyes, he found something else: respect. "Commander Zethkar," she said with a slight bow, "thank you for agreeing to meet with me." "You requested this meeting, Dr. Green. What do you wish to discuss?" "The end of this war," she replied simply. "But first, I want to acknowledge something. You are an exceptional military commander. In 3 years of fighting, you have pushed us to our limits and beyond. Your tactical skills are remarkable." Zethkar was surprised. No defeated enemy had ever complimented his abilities before. They usually begged for mercy or cursed him as a monster. This human was treating him like a worthy opponent. "Your species has proven more resilient than expected," he admitted. "But you cannot win this war. My technology is still superior to yours." "You're right," Dr. Green said. "We cannot match your weapons or your starships, but we have something else, something that might interest you more than victory." "What is that?" "A way for both our peoples to end this conflict with honor intact." For the next 2 hours, Dr. Green outlined a proposal that was unlike any surrender terms Zethkar had ever heard. Instead of unconditional defeat, she was offering a negotiated withdrawal that would allow the Valdorans to leave Earth with their military reputation undamaged. "You have proven your strength," she explained. "No one in the galaxy will question Valdoran military power after this war. But continuing to fight will only cost both our peoples more lives for no strategic gain." As they talked, Zethkar realized something that disturbed him deeply. This human understood military thinking better than some of his own officers. She knew exactly what motivated Valdoran commanders and was offering him something that would satisfy his people's need for honor while ending the destruction. During their negotiation, Admiral Tony Walsh was preparing the final human offensive. Unlike previous human attacks, this one was planned with surgical precision. Instead of desperate last stands or suicide missions, Walsh was coordinating a campaign designed to force Valdoran withdrawal while minimizing casualties on both sides. "Remember," he told his commanders during the final briefing, "our goal is not to destroy the enemy fleet. Our goal is to make them understand that continuing this war serves no purpose for either side." General Chris Miller led the ground forces in the coordinated assault. His troops had learned much about Valdoran tactics over 3 years of fighting. They knew how to exploit the aliens' reliance on technology and their unfamiliarity with human psychological warfare. But instead of the brutal attacks that had characterized earlier battles, Miller's forces used precision strikes designed to disable rather than destroy. They targeted communication centers, supply lines, and command posts while carefully avoiding areas where civilian Valdorans might be present. The message was clear: humans could strike anywhere they chose, but they chose to fight with restraint. Commander. Zethkar watched the human offensive from his command ship and felt something he had never experienced before. These humans were not just defeating his forces. They were showing mercy to an enemy that had invaded their world and killed millions of their people. Every military instinct told him that such mercy was weakness. But after 3 years of fighting humans, he knew better. Their mercy was not weakness, it was confidence. They were so certain of their ultimate victory that they could afford to be generous to their enemies. The final phase of the human campaign came when Captain Amy Rodriguez led a coordinated space attack against the main Valdoran fleet. Her pilots had improved dramatically since the early days of the war. They flew with skill and coordination that rivaled veteran Valdoran squadrons. But what impressed Zethkar most was their discipline. When Valdoran ships tried to surrender, the human pilots immediately ceased fire and provided safe passage. When damaged enemy vessels requested assistance, human rescue ships responded without hesitation. These were not the primitive savages he had expected to conquer 3 years earlier. These were skilled warriors who fought with honor and treated their enemies with dignity. Sam Parker, the resistance fighter who had been captured and rescued 2 years earlier, participated in the final ground assault. He had become one of Jake Morrison's most trusted lieutenants, and his experience as a prisoner had given him unique insights into Valdoran psychology. "They fight like machines," he explained to his unit before the attack. "Efficient, logical, predictable, but that's also their weakness. They don't understand passion or improvisation. Hit them hard, hit them fast, then disappear before they can organize a response." The human assault was devastatingly effective. Within 72 hours, Valdoran ground forces were isolated and cut off from their supply lines. Their communication networks were disrupted, their command structure was in chaos, and their technological advantages had been neutralized by 3 years of human adaptation and innovation. But instead of pressing for total victory, the humans offered terms. "We don't want to destroy you," Jake Morrison said during a radio broadcast that reached every Valdoran position on Earth. "We want you to leave our world and never come back. Do that, and this war ends today with honor for everyone." Standing on the bridge of his flagship, Commander Zethkar looked down at the planet he had failed to conquer. The humans had given him a choice: continue fighting a war he could not win or withdraw with dignity intact. It was not a difficult decision. "Prepare the fleet for departure," he ordered. "All ground forces will evacuate immediately." "Sir," Captain Veltar asked quietly, "what do we report to the High Command?" Zethkar considered this for a long moment. How could he explain what had happened here? How could he make his superiors understand that the humans had not just defeated him militarily, but had shown him a completely different way to think about war and honor? "We report that we encountered a species worthy of respect," he said finally. "We report that some battles are more important for what they teach than for what they conquer." As the Valdoran fleet prepared to leave Earth's solar system, Zethkar made entries in his personal log that he knew would change how he thought about war for the rest of his life. "The humans taught me something I never learned in 3 centuries of easy victories," he wrote. "True strength is not the ability to destroy your enemies. True strength is the wisdom to know when destruction serves no purpose." Years later, when other Valdoran commanders proposed new attacks on human space, Zethkar would counsel against them, not because humans were too dangerous to fight, but because they had proven themselves worthy of something more valuable than conquest: respect. The wars with humans had changed him forever, transforming a conqueror into something his species had never produced before. A warrior who understood that the greatest victories were the ones that honored both sides.